Welcome to this week's lesson, all about creativity. We're going to be exploring composition and improvisation, and I'm going to show you how to do it. Be sure that you have some staff paper, something to write with. If you didn't have time to get staff paper this week, no worries. Just go grab a piece of paper and a pencil and let's get going. So for this week, I'm going to be using some visuals. That way you guys can really visually see what I'm talking about as I'm explaining, because I'm throwing a lot of new words, a lot of new things at you, okay? So composition, what is it? It's basically something that you write that's original, that you write down and record with paper, or you record it maybe into an audio recording device. That's your composition. Improvisation means to create by mental or artistic labor. So that may sound like a lot, and you might be like, well, I don't understand. Those seem like the same thing. Let's talk about what the difference is, okay? So composition is something that you write down. Improvisation is not. Improvisation is like making up a sentence as I go on the fly versus writing down on a piece of paper my sentence. So composition is like, let's say I'm telling a story. I write down the story or I type out the story on a piece of paper versus improvisation where I'm thinking of the story at the top of my head and just saying it out loud, okay? Improvisation takes place in real time. That basically means in real life, improvisation is happening. Composition happens, you set aside time, and then you present it. It's something that you present later. But with improvisation, it's happening right on the dot, okay? So composition's doing it in advance, and then improvisation is doing it right on the spot, okay? And then number 3, improvisation is a group activity. So now this one, it doesn't always have to be the case, but I thought I'd go ahead and explain it. When they say improvisation is a group activity, what it's saying is that usually it's done with a person who's improvising, and then there's people in the back accompanying. So for example, a trumpet player who's improvising on the trumpet, and then you have drums and you have a string bass and maybe a piano that's accompanying in the back, and they're usually just playing a certain set of laid out notes. So they're not the ones improvising, only the trumpet player's improvising. Okay, so when we go through improvisation, you might be like, oh my gosh, that seems like a lot of information. Here's some tips to help you kind of break it down and make it a little bit less intimidating. Okay, guess what? You need to use what you know, and you know a lot more than you may realize. So far in Recorder, we've been learning G, A, B, and C. That means that you have 4 different notes that you can improvise on. The other thing is, you might be wondering, well, what if I mess up? What if I try to play a B and then some other funky sound comes out? Well, you tell me what happens when you mess up. Does anything really happen? Am I going to come out from the computer screen and come get you? No. It's all good. When people mess up, that's one of the best ways to discover some new idea that you didn't even have in the first place. Just keep going. So some of the most beautiful pieces of music ever written, or you'll see it in other areas like architecture and paintings, some of the most beautiful creations ever made were made when people messed up, and what they ended up providing for them and their end product ended up not being what was intended to be there at all. Their final product ended up being completely different, but honestly way better than what they were thinking in the first place in their heads. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our improvisation activity, our first one. I call this one Just Go, because that's what it is. You just gotta go for it and do it. Like I mentioned a moment ago, you just use the notes that you know. In our case, it's G, A, B, and C. But let's say, for example, you're like, oh, Miss Mari, I'm still really trying to work on that transition from B to C, and I don't know if I can have in all those other notes. It's okay. The great thing about improvisation is you can even do a lot with just one note. So let's say you only feel comfortable right now making up songs using B. That's fine. So I'm just going to make up something right on the fly like this. So I literally just kind of made that up off the top of my head, okay? That was only using B, okay? In a moment, I'm going to have an accompaniment playing. I'm going to count you off. I'll be playing some percussion accompaniment, and all I want you to do is just pick whatever notes you want. Okay, so I'm just going to count you off, and we're going to get going. Just play whatever you like. 1, 2, ready, and go. Stop, 2, ready, and stop. Awesome. Now with any of these accompaniments, go back and try it different ways. I want you to try playing with different notes. So let's say this first time you just played with G's. Go back, do it again. I want you to try doing it with A's, B's, C's, and hey, if you're even up to it, add in all 4. Do some stepwise motion from G to A, or do a skipping motion from G to B. You can do this. Okay, so this time I'm gonna play a slightly different accompaniment pattern, and you can either continue playing with just the notes that you did this first time, or add in some more notes. I really hope that you try to add in at least one more note this time. Here we go. And 1, 2, ready, and go. Stop, 2, ready, and go. All right, awesome. For our next activity, we're going to go to the music staff and we're going to improvise. But what I did was I made up some notes and I'm going to have you make up some notes to fill in. So we're going to call this one Choose Your Own Melody. The first line that we're going to be working on, I have a 2-measure piece of music that starts with a C and ends with a C. Now tell me, how many beats is this C worth? Hopefully you remember that since this C is a quarter note, it's worth 1 beat. Next question, how many beats is this C worth? Hopefully you figured out that this C is worth 2 beats because it's a half note. We know that it's a half note because it's not filled in like this quarter note that's filled in. Now, we haven't talked about time signature too much, but time signature, that just tells us how many beats are in each measure, okay? So we have 4 beats in each measure. That's what this 4 means, okay? So we need to create 3 more beats in this measure. And then how many more beats do we need to create in this measure if we already have 2 beats on that C? This measure, how many more beats do we need? If we already have 2 beats in measure 2, all we have to do is figure out 2 more beats in this second measure. So the first measure, we need to figure out 3 beats. Second measure, only 2. So I'm going to play the C, and I want you to figure out whatever you want for these next 3 beats, and then these next 2 beats and a C, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play. I'm going to count you off, I'm going to play, and then you're going to fill in whatever you like. I'm going to turn on the metronome. That way you can hear the steady beat and play along with the metronome so you don't get lost, okay? Here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. How was it? Was it crazy? Was it way too fast? Let's try to slow down a little bit. Okay, so we're going to try it now at 76 beats per minute. So a little bit slower for you. And 1, 2, ready, go. I'm going to give you a little example of my own improvisation, okay? Just to give you an idea of what we're doing in case you might be confused. Okay, me, to, listen, go. So you can see I started with that C and I ended with the C, but I just added something else. I'll do another example for you, okay? This one I'll use less notes. 1, 2, listen, go. Okay, and now I want you to try again. Now that you've heard a couple of my examples, I'm going to play and you're going to fill in the stuff in between. Then it's your turn to play. And 1, 2, ready, and go. Okay, let me turn off this metronome. So now let's take a look at line number 2, our second line, okay? This time, we start on, what note is this? A G. Now, tell me, what kind of notes are this G and this A? Hopefully you figured out that those are eighth notes. Remember, an eighth note, each one is worth half a beat. So if we have 2 notes worth half a beat, then how many beats is it worth total? If each one is worth half a beat, then these 2 together equal 1 beat, okay? That means that we have 3 beats remaining worth of notes that you're going to add in. Now let's look at the second measure. What's this right here? That's our rest, which is worth 1 beat. We have a G, and what kind of note is this? Is it a quarter note, half note, or eighth note? Hopefully you figured out it's a quarter note worth 1 beat. Since we have 4 beats in each measure, then we will have 2 remaining beats in the second measure, measure 2, that we are going to have you fill in whatever notes you want. Okay? I'm going to turn on the metronome again. And we're just going to do this. Just go for it. If you only feel comfortable using G's with everything you fill in, that's fine. Try to use other notes if you can, but if it's too scary now, then just add in more as you practice and you get more comfortable. And 1, 2, play with me. Again, 2, ready, and go. Okay, I will give you an example of my improvisation. So I'm going to make something up on the spot, okay? 1, 2, listen, go. I'll do another example. Okay, and 1, 2, listen, go. Did you hear how in that second measure, I added in a little rest on beat 2? So don't be afraid to do that too. You can take some little rest, some little breaks. So this is the fun part now, because now you are going to compose. I'm not going to guide you. This is where you need to be sure that you have staff paper. If you don't have staff paper, grab some paper and just draw the 5 lines for your music staff, and you can get going that way too. I want you to start out by just doing a 2-measure composition, kind of similar to what we did a second ago on the music staff, where you just have those 2 measures. I don't want you to do anything longer than that, okay? You can use G's, A's, B's, or C's, and you can use the rhythms that you see here on your rhythm choices. You can use those too. You can use some of them. You can use all of them. It's up to you. Do what feels comfortable for you. Okay? And some tips. If you're feeling stuck about how to start or end a piece, you're like, I don't even know where to start. Decide, okay, what note do I want to start on? So you can say, all right, I'm going to start on G. Well, it might help you if you start the piece on G to also have your last pitch or note in the piece also be a G. Okay, that's one little tip. You don't have to do that, but I know for me, I need a little bit of someone telling me to do something. I need some boundaries in order to just get going initially, or else I just feel stuck. Okay? Another tip for you is to use rests. You do not have to fill in every single beat with sound. Sometimes rests, remember, which is the absence of sound, can really add some interesting effects to a piece of music as well. And then another general rule, you can take it or leave it. If you don't want to do it, don't listen to Miss Mari. You don't have to do this last one. Generally, the last 2 beats of a piece of music are either a half note, which is worth 2 beats, or it's a rest, and right before the rest is a quarter note. So those last 2 beats would be a quarter note, then rest. Generally, you don't have to do that. It's really okay if you're like, Miss Mari, I don't like your idea and I think it's terrible. That's fine. But those are just some general guidelines to help you get started with your own if you need the help. Maybe you don't need my help, and that's cool too. So why all of a sudden are we going from you doing exactly what I say and the way I tell you to do it to, hey, just go ahead and play? That might seem really confusing and not make sense to you, and it might even seem like our previous lessons were a waste of time. That's a really, really good observation. Very good. Here's the deal. In order to know how to compose music, you have to be able to have certain basics underneath your belt. The best way I can compare it is by saying, okay, if you want to be able to write a sentence, you have to know how to read. You have to know how to read sentences first in a book. You have to know what the alphabet is. You have to know how to pronounce the words. You have to know what the words mean. There's certain things that in order to be creative, there's certain things that you have to get down, certain fundamentals or basics like we've been working on that you must get down in order to create a great quality composition. I would absolutely love to see your compositions and what you've come up with. Post in the comments, take some pictures of your pieces, or you can even do a video response to this so I can see what you're working on. I can't wait to see what you come up with. I hope you enjoyed this lesson as much as I did, and I hope that you really take some time to go through the information that we worked on, okay? Go through those accompaniment examples again and try different things. I know after I'm done filming this, I'm totally gonna go and play along and try some different ideas. I want you to have fun with this. I'll see you next week.